Have you ever stopped to think about how ancient societies handled really complex problems, like things like justice and social welfare? Well, today we're going to dive deep into the book of Joshua because it lays out two fascinating and honestly surprisingly sophisticated systems that were designed to build a brand new nation.
Okay, so just imagine this for a second. There's a tragic accident, and somebody dies. In all that chaos and grief, what happens next? How does a society make sure there's justice for the family, without the whole thing just spiraling into this endless cycle of revenge? It's a huge question, right? Every single legal system has to figure that one out. Well, believe it or not, thousands of years ago, this ancient text laid out a really remarkable solution to that exact problem. It's basically a detailed blueprint for a society that's trying to walk this incredibly fine line, balancing the scales between accountability on one side and compassion on the other. It's all about justice and mercy.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to go back in time. Picture this. The ancient Israelites are finally settling into their new land. And this wasn't just about, drawing some borders on a map. No, this was about building an entire society from scratch. And as you can imagine, that came with some pretty serious challenges.
Right. So as they're getting established, two massive problems bubble up to the surface that they just had to solve. First, that whole blood feud thing we talked about. How do you stop an accidental death from kicking off a devastating family versus family war that could last for generations? And second, a totally different kind of problem. How do you support an entire tribe, the priestly tribe of Levi, when they were the one tribe given absolutely no land of their own?
All right, let's break down that first problem. Their solution? It was brilliant. It was a network of special places known as the cities of refuge. And their whole purpose was to be a sanctuary, a safe haven designed specifically to break that destructive cycle of vengeance.
And this is where you see some real legal genius at work. The law made this incredibly important distinction. It drew a hard line between a deliberate, premeditated act, murder, done with intent, and a tragic accident, an unintentional killing, what we'd call manslaughter today. And the penalties were completely different. For murder, the penalty was death. But for that accidental killing, it wasn't death. It was exile in one of those special cities.
Okay, so this is where a really key figure enters the picture, the Avenger of Blood. Now, that sounds super dramatic, right? But this wasn't some vigilante out for revenge. Not at all. This was an official legal role. It was a job given to a close relative, and their duty wasn't to get personal revenge, but to carry out the society's official judgment. And that distinction, it's absolutely crucial. It moved justice away from a private family matter and put it squarely in the hands of the community.
And this really gets to the core principle behind the whole system. The text is super clear. Ultimate vengeance belongs to God and God alone. So that Avenger of Blood, they were just an agent of the community's justice system. They weren't settling a personal score. And that is what stopped those endless, destructive cycles of an eye for an eye from ever getting started.
So what did this actually look like? Say you're the one who accidentally caused a death. What happens? Well, the process was laid out step by step. First, you run. You flee immediately to the nearest city of refuge. Once you're there, you stand trial before the community. And if they agree it was an accident, you're given sanctuary. You get to live safely inside the city walls, protected from the Avenger of Blood. But you had to stay there. You had to stay until one very specific major event happened, the death of the current high priest. Only then, and not a moment sooner, could you go home completely free.
But wait, why the high priest's death? It sounds kind of random, right? But it wasn't arbitrary at all. It was a huge symbolic trigger for the entire nation. You can almost think of it like a societal reset button. See, the death of the nation's top spiritual leader was this massive national event. It was a time for everyone to mourn and reflect. It was a way of saying that the debt for the lost life, even an accidental one, had been paid at the very highest level. The slate was wiped clean, and the person in exile could finally go home.
And you know what else is brilliant about this? The system was designed to be accessible to everyone. There were 6 of these cities of refuge in total. They were strategically placed all over the nation, with 3 on each side of the Jordan River, and they were mapped out so that no matter where you were never more than about a day's journey from safety. Think about that. Justice and mercy were literally always within reach.
Okay, so this system of special cities is already pretty amazing, right? It solves that whole blood feud problem. But here's where it gets even cooler. It solves 2 problems at once, because these cities also provided the answer to that second big challenge we mentioned.
What to do with the tribe of Levi, the priests who were given no land.
So, the whole thing starts with the number one. One tribe, the tribe of Levi, set apart from all the others for a very special purpose. And that special purpose came with a pretty unique catch. And that catch is represented by the number 0. Because unlike every other tribe, the Levites got 0 land. No big territory, no farmland to call their own, nothing. So if they didn't get a big chunk of land, what did they get? Well, they got 48. 48 specific cities scattered all throughout the other tribes' territories. And here's the big connection, the aha moment. All 6 of those cities of refuge we just talked about, they were part of this network. They were Levitical cities, run by the very tribe that was dedicated to law and spiritual matters. See how it all fits together?
So why? Why no land for them? It's because their inheritance wasn't supposed to be physical, it was spiritual. The text says their inheritance, their portion, was the priesthood itself. It was serving God, having a direct relationship with God. Their job was to depend on Him and on the offerings from the people, not on a harvest from their own fields.
And this reveals the incredible strategy behind the whole plan. By scattering these 48 Levitical cities all over the nation, it works out to about 4 per tribe. The system made sure that spiritual guidance, teaching, and legal expertise were never far away from anyone. They were meant to be like a spiritual leaven mixed into the dough of the nation. Or, as the text says, like salt and light, preserving the moral and spiritual health of everyone from the inside out.
So let's step back for a minute. We've got these 2 really intricate systems working together, one for justice, the other for spiritual well-being. But this isn't just about clever social planning. This all fits into a much, much bigger theme that runs through the entire book of Joshua. And that theme is all about promises being kept.
Right at the end of this whole section describing the land and these special cities, the book just kind of pauses. It gives a summary, and the first point is huge. It's emphatic. That promise of land, a promise made generations and generations before, it was now fulfilled, done.
And the next promise that was fulfilled? Rest and security. I mean, after the long journey, after all the battles to settle the land, the people were finally at peace. Their enemies were subdued, just like God had promised. And then comes the powerful conclusion to the whole thing. It says that not one word of all the good promises the Lord had made had failed. Everything came to pass. The establishment of these cities, both for refuge and for the Levites, it was all part of the final proof. Every little detail of their new society was a testament to this much bigger story of faithfulness.
So, this whole ancient system leaves us with a pretty timeless question, doesn't it? The cities of refuge were one culture's answer, a really structured attempt to basically hardwire mercy right into their legal code. And it really makes you think, what are the cities of refuge in our own societies today? How do we, right now, continue to build systems where that delicate balance between justice and mercy can truly coexist?